Hey everyone, welcome to the Way Wednesdays, doing a virtual Midrash. If this is your first time with us, which I hope it isn't, but if it is, what is a Midrash? Midrash means that we are seeking the meaning of the text. That's really what Darash means, okay? Midrash or Midrash. We're seeking, we're looking, what does this thing mean, okay? So we start by reading it, and then we talk about it. My co-host Bob should be here soon. I hope so. He's having a little trouble technical issues, so keep him in prayer. But let's jump in because, as always, there's amazing content in God's Word. I love it. And in case you didn't know, we are in VaYishlach, and He sent. And this is in Genesis chapter 32. So without any further ado, let's jump right in and we'll get into it. Okay, so here we go. And he commanded them, saying, Speak thus to my lord Esau. Thus your servant Jacob says, I have dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now. I have oxen, donkeys, flocks, and male and female servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find favor in your sight. Then the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, We came to your brother Esau, and he also is coming to meet you with 400 men are with him. And so Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that were with him and the flocks and herds and camels into two companies. And he said, If Esau comes to the one company and attacks it, then the other company, which is left, will escape. Then Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham and God of my father Isaac, the Lord who said to me, Return to your country and to your family, and I will deal well with you. Am I not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which you have shown your servant? For I crossed over this Jordan with my staff, and now I've become two companies. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he come and attack me and the mother and with the children. For you said, I will surely treat you well and make your descendants as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he lodged there that night and took what came to his hand as a present for Esau his brother. 200 female goats and 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 foals. Then he delivered them in the hands of his servants. Each drove by itself and said to his servants, Pass over before me and put some distance between successive droves. And he commanded the first one, saying, When Esau my brother meets you and asks you, saying, To whom do you belong, and where are you going? Whose are these in front of you? Then you shall say, They are your servant Jacob's. It is a present sent to my lord Esau, and behold, he is also behind us. So he commanded the second, the third, and all who followed the drove, saying, In this manner you shall speak to Esau when you find him. And also say, Behold, your servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goes before me, and afterward I will see his face. Perhaps he will accept me. So the present went on over before him, but he himself lodged that night in the camp. And he arose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Jabbok. And he took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaks. But he said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said to him, What is your name? He said, Jacob. And he said, Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and men and have prevailed. Then Jacob asked, saying, Tell me your name, I pray. And he said, Why is it that you ask me about my name? And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. Just as he crossed over Penuel, the sun rose on him, and he limped on his hip. Therefore, to this day, the children of Israel do not eat the muscle that shrank, which is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip in the muscle that shrank. All right. Wow. There's so many cool things in this passage. I don't know where to start, guys, but why don't we just kind of go back to the relative beginning and let's make our way through the text. Oh, I love it. All right, let me pull up the Hebrew so we have both of these guys together because there's, fun stuff in here. All right. Well, first of all I can say is what comes around goes around. What you sow, that you will reap. And so Jacob left 20 years earlier stole the birthright and blessing of the firstborn from his brother, and he tricked his dad. And now it appears his mother is dead. That's a later segment. But he's coming back and he's lost a whole bunch. But of course, he's gained a whole bunch. And now he doesn't know what's happening. 400 men. Esau is bringing 400 men. And yeah, he's kind of nervous, right? So he sends his servants and he says, okay, I want you to say this to Esau. Say this: I've dwelt with Laban and stayed there until now, and I've got all these flocks and donkeys, and they're yours. And please take them if I found favor in your sight. So what's interesting is when Isaac blessed Jacob, when Jacob stole the blessing that was intended for Esau, guess what? Was Jacob blessed? Has he come back financially wealthy? Yes, he has. He's got all this stuff. But what is he now doing? He is really prostrating himself, in a mental sense, okay, before his brothers. He's humbling himself. He wants to give all these things to his brother. And those are the very things that were prophesied would happen to Jacob. And now Jacob is giving them, or wants to give them, to Esau. What incredible irony. And Esau is no pauper. This guy is not, on his last nickel. He's got 400 mighty men with him, and plus whatever is back at the house, right? He's got all this stuff. So he has clearly been blessed. And guess what? While Jacob was off finding his fortune and a wife, where did Esau stay? Man, sounds like he stayed pretty much close to home, right? He probably has inherited his parents' estate, right? I mean, there was nobody else to take it. Who are they going to leave it to? They only had 2 sons, and one of them is gone, and who knows what's happening to him. And so Esau gets all this stuff. It's one of those incredible twists of irony, right? Where God, he tells us something, and when we take matters into our own hands, it's not that God can't bless us. He most certainly can bless us, and he does, and he will keep his promises. However, there's an easy path and there's a hard path. And in my opinion, Jacob chose the hard path, right? He could have done things in a much more, truthful kind of way. He could have kept his integrity. His mother didn't help, that's for sure. And then, he gets scammed up there, and now he's coming back and he's like, oh my goodness, this is it. I mean, I'm going to die, right? All this stuff I've gotten. And it's kind of funny a little bit that he has this prayer. I don't know about you, but I've had this prayer before, right? You kind of get to that place and you're like, oh boy, this could be it. My world is falling apart. Oh, what do I do? And you have this prayer with God, like, hey, God, you still like me, don't you? Like, I know I'm not a perfect guy, but remember you made some promises and I've been trying to stand on those quite imperfectly, and he's kind of got this hand wringing going on, right? Oh no. Hey, Lord, you still there? Knock, knock. Hello, are you still there? And, it seems like all is lost. But of course, we've read ahead and we know that it's not. And he's asking to be delivered from his brother Esau. And again, he doesn't know. So he has this plan, right? He's going to send waves of his servants with a bunch of gifts to try to appease him. And if somehow Esau isn't nice and he kills the first wave, well, maybe the second wave can get away. Right. And that's the basic plan. OK, and so this is what should happen. And it seems like a pretty good plan. It's using his intellect here instead of relaxing with the promise that God gave him. Look, I'm no better. I'm not throwing Jacob under the bus because, I haven't done any better in life. All right. So I'm just like Jacob, if I'm even that good. All right, so he crosses over the Jabbok River, and this is putting a little bit more safety between them, right? Maybe if everything goes to pot, then they can get away on the other side. This is obviously a defensive measure. But look what happens there. This is where he wrestles this guy. Vayivateo Yaakov levado vayavek ish imo ad alot hashachar. Right? So then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Who is this guy? Who is this person that's wrestling with Jacob? Well, let's ask Jacob. Hey, Jacob, who were you wrestling with? He says, well, I'm going to call this place Peniel, right? So the panim, panim is the face, okay? So literally faces, panim, Peniel is the face of God. So according to Jacob, who was he wrestling with? Apparently God. Now, wait a second. How can God take on a physical form when God is only spirit? At least that's what we hear so often from some of our Jewish colleagues, right? I believe there's no problem whatsoever as a believer in Yeshua. I believe that this is the pre-incarnate Christ. This is what we call a Christophany, right? You could call it a theophany, that this is an appearance of God, but more specifically, it's a Christophany. This is an appearance of Christ before he actually truly took on flesh. That tells us, one, that he can be a shape shifter, right? He can take on any form that he desires because he's God, right? He's pretty cool. He can do that stuff. And so here he takes on the form of a human. Remember, whose image were we made in? God's image and God's likeness. Okay, so this is already God's default appearance. Okay, and we see that so many places. When we get into Exodus, we're going to see that that Moses, Aaron, Nadav, and Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel, they went up the mountain and they saw God's feet, and they saw this sapphire, this pavement of sapphire stone, and it says that they saw God, and they ate and drank, and they didn't die. Wow. Okay, so we know God has feet. And Ezekiel, he sees this vision of God, but it's a vision of God, right? And he sees fire from his waist up and from his waist down, mingled with fire and electricity and all this stuff. And he's seeing God. Daniel has a vision, and he sees the Ancient of Days, Atik Yamin, and he has fire from his waist up and from his waist down, and he looks humanoid. Okay, that's what is really significant. Not humanoid, but he looks human because, well, we're made in his image, not vice versa. All right, so God does have a form, despite what people often will tell us. In fact, I just heard somebody last night say, "Oh no, God doesn't have any form whatsoever," and I would beg to differ, but I digress. Okay, so he's wrestling. Now, why did God show up and wrestle him? Well, why did God show up and wrestle Jacob? Right? That's the big question. Well, on the one hand, God does what God wants to do. On the other hand, I would propose this. It's not so much that God is wrestling with Jacob, but it's Jacob who's been wrestling with God, right? He's now facing this crisis scenario. Everything seems lost. Esau, his brother, the one that he stole and cheated 20 years before, is coming with an army that can only mean one thing. I'm going to die, right? Everything I have, all the promises are going to, it's over. This is definitely a nadir in his existence, right? He's like, oh man, this is it. God apparently, I guess, has failed me. But of course, God isn't failing him, right? That, we know that, but he doesn't know that. And so Jacob, is wrestling with God. Jacob, the heel catcher, right? The deceiver, that guy, he's wrestling with God. God, are you true? Are you faithful? Have we ever wrestled with God? I think we've wrestled with God probably many times. And again, it's not God wrestling with us. we're wrestling with him because we're asking that same question. Can I trust you? Can I? I heard the promises and I kind of believe them and I've kind of seen them, but now there's this new crisis. You ever have that thing where, you're in a crisis, you pray, God grants your request, and like, whew, I'm never going to doubt him again. And then the next crisis comes along and it's like twice as big, like, oh my goodness, I'm dead. And you feel like you're in that same place. This is where Jacob is, right? He's had trial after trial. Now, this is the bigger trial. And he's like, oh, well, this is it, right? And so he's wrestling with God. He's wrestling. And so now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, so this would be the angel of the Lord, I would say Jesus, is wrestling with Jacob, and he's not prevailing. It's interesting that he's not prevailing. Certainly, God could overpower him, right? No question about it. So this isn't just a wrestling match of who is stronger, but there's a certain amount of will going on here, and Jacob is in that place where he's not letting go. He's not resting in God. Ever been there? I've been there, where I'm not letting go, Lord, because I don't know. I mean, I think Jacob is holding on for dear life at this point. And, it only takes one touch. He touches his hip and he puts it out of joint. And so that the angel, this man, says, let me go, for day breaks. He said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. So he said, and what's your name? Jacob. I want a blessing. Okay, I'm going to change your name. That seems strange, doesn't it? Like, I want a blessing. Okay, here you go. Here's a couple tanks and machine guns. You can fight your brother off, no problem. Or here's a force field to put around you and all the people, so he can't break through, right? Like, that's what I think of when I think of blessing, or mountains of gold. But God's like, no. I'm going to change your name. That's going to be the blessing. What? That's the blessing? How can changing a name be a blessing? Well, because you've been the heel catcher, the deceiver, but now you're going to be the one who wrestles with God. Wrestles with God. And depending on how you look at the word, okay, Yisra, it could be to wrestle, of course. There's also the word Sar, and that means a ruler, a prince. And so it could be one who is ruled by God. There's some debate about that. Clearly here it says, because you were wrestling. But there's also people that would make the case that it's to be ruled by God. And maybe it's a double entendre. Maybe it's both, right? So the blessing here is you're not going to be the heel catcher anymore, the deceiver. You're going to be the one who wrestles with God, maybe who's ruled by God, and you've prevailed. You've prevailed. This is really epic, because here he has been waiting, wrestling. God, can I trust you? And now he's wrestled through this scenario. And guess what? God is faithful, right? Well, that's a great place to get to. Of course, most of us want to get there without having our hip dislocated. But, anyway, so he's wrestling with God, and then we come to daybreak. All right, so Jacob lifts his eyes. Let's get into this next chapter. And looks like my co-host is here. Fantastic. All right, Bob, we're going to read the next chapter, so hang tight. We'll be right back. All right, here we go. Now Jacob lifted his eyes and looked, and there Esau was coming, with him 400 men. So he divided the children among Leah, Rachel, and the two maidservants. And he put the maidservants and their children in front, Leah and her children behind, and Rachel and Joseph last. Then he crossed over before them and bowed himself to the ground 7 times until he came near to his brother. But Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children and said, who are these with you? So he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Then the maidservants came near, they and their children, and bowed down. And Leah also came near with her children, and they bowed down. Afterward, Joseph and Rachel came near, and they bowed down. Then Esau said, what do you mean by all this company which I met? And he said, these are to find favor in the sight of my Lord. But Esau said, I have enough, brother. Keep what you have for yourself. And Jacob said, no, please, if I found favor in your sight, then receive my present from my hand, inasmuch as I have seen your face, as though I had seen the face of God. Penuel, remember that. And you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because God has dealt graciously with me, and because I have enough. So he urged him, and he took it. Then Esau said, let us take our journey. Let us go, and I will go before you. But Jacob said to him, my Lord knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herds which are nursing are with me. And if the men should drive them hard one day, all the flock will die. Please let my Lord go on ahead before his servant. I will lead on slowly at a pace with the livestock, that go before me, and the children are able to endure until I come to my Lord in Seir. And Esau said, now let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, what need is there? Let me find favor in the sight of my Lord. So Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. And Jacob journeyed to Sukkot, built himself a house, and made booths for his livestock. Therefore, the name of the place is called Sukkot. Then Jacob came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. And he brought the parcel of land where he had pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 pieces of money. Then he erected an altar there and called it El Elohe Israel. All right. Hey, Bob. Oh, man, you're muted. So glad that you could get on.
Yeah, nothing but technical problems. Sorry about that.
Part of the fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The unknown.
Yeah. Well, again, we kind of saw this in the previous chapter, but now all those blessings that Isaac had pronounced over Jacob, right? Jacob is now doing those things to his brother, right? He's calling him my Lord. I am your servant. He bows down 7 times. Here, take all my stuff, right? And
just don't kill me.
Yeah, Esau's like, come on, bro, what are you doing? He says, Achi, what's up with this? And Jacob never calls him brother. He calls him my Lord. Me, right?
I'm your servant. Yeah.
So, it's good to have humble pie. That's certainly good. And I think his demeanor probably helped the encounter for sure. But, again, a lot of this mess was of his own making because the way he cheated his brother in the first place, so it's just ironic, that it wasn't that Isaac was going to get nothing and just be a pauper, but is that God wanted to impart this blessing to a person who would then be the one that the lineage of the Messiah would ultimately come through. And of course, that's going to go through Jacob, and the oracles of the Lord and all that is going to go through Jacob and his 12 sons, not through Esau, right? So God's got a plan for Esau. It's different. And he's got a plan, of course, for Israel. So, all right, catch us up here. What are your thoughts? Since you kind of a little bit late, go ahead and take it away.
Well, the whole notion that Jacob have now Israel, his whole notion was that he had 20 years of expectations. Part of that was every time he thought about it, he thought about terror, because they didn't leave on really the best of terms, as we know. But one thing did happen. He was surprised when he hears that there's 400 soldiers, special forces that are there. It occurred to me, that was the expectation that Jacob had. But in the badlands of that area, they're coming up from Edom. They're essentially from the far south of Israel on the Jordanian side, and he's coming up through that area. That area, you need 400 soldiers. that area is not exactly the most welcoming place on the planet. And so now he's going to go up there because his brother has sent messengers. And he says, my brother is way up there? Well, I'm going to have to take a security team with me so that we're all safe. And we'll meet him wherever we meet him on the way down. So he's moving down all right. On one side, it is, I have security for my brother and for myself and the people that we are responsible for. And on the other side of the team, Jacob is going, oh my God. And he's making all kinds of amends. He's telling God, I got to have this backup plan. I have a tactical plan to survive. I've got to give gifts to my brother. Maybe that'll kind of cut the edge off of our previous experience. He's still living in the past. He's still living, realizing that his brother actually ended up with the entire estate. And they didn't leave on great terms. However, 20 years does cover up a bunch of problems. And now that Esau hears from the messengers of Jacob, your brother's coming down to greet you. He's coming home. He is. Wow. He's coming home. And on his part of the bargain of this situation, he's happy. He's pleased to see his brother 20 years past. You know, his mom died. He never got to see her or her grave. And a lot of time has gone under the bridge. And so he goes up with an army to go greet his brother. Little to the insight that that Jacob had. He had to fight with Laban. He finally left in peace with Laban, comes into the land, and miraculously his eyes open. And what is it that he sees? He sees an angelic host. And from the reading, you get the idea that this is God's camp. This is the camp of all these angelic creatures. Very similar, reminiscent of the story that's going to happen in the future with Elijah, or Elisha rather, who was saying to his servant, Lord, open his eyes that he may see what really is. And the veil disappears, and he sees the angelic hosts of heaven with all their armies, etc. That takes care of the fear. And in the same token, his eyes are open. Jacob's eyes are open the moment he starts entering into the land of promise. He realizes, and he renames that place. He calls it God's host. This is home. This is getting home. And he travels and he sets up this tactical plan to send gifts to Esau, and then divide the camp and his family up in ways so that he has some tactical advantage to at least save some of whatever his booty is in the 20 years of suffering and hard work that he has taken out of the land of Laban. And now he greets his brother. And everything that he had imagined wasn't going to happen. The terror of his soul didn't happen. And he realized when he took that attitude of a servant. Of course, he didn't have 400 soldiers. But those 400 soldiers were not going to come in and destroy him or his family. And his brother is overwhelmed by him. In that overwhelming reality, he still is not exactly trusting in what's going to happen. So he says, no, I'll go this way, and I have sheep, and we have to. You're not taking what I've given you, so I've got to take care of what I have. And instead of following him, he decides to make a turn to go west. So he goes west. Young men go west, and that's where the story will take us downstream. But it's an important thing to understand that whenever we have these difficulties in our past with our families or whatever, we still imagine whatever that date was when we got stuck.
Yep.
And all kinds of things happen. But we don't imagine that we're going to be welcomed. And that was the pleasant surprise that he got. And still, he didn't know how to receive it. He still didn't know if he should go down there. But he did know the plan. What is the scream out of his heart? Help! That's my plan. Help, God, help. Remember the deal that I made with you. Remember that one? You said you're going to make, let me see if I can remember. Oh yeah, that one line, I can't forget that one. That all the seed that I was going to produce, it was going to be like the beach sand. It was going to be huge. That's your promise to me. I didn't say anything to you other than if you provided what you said, and I think you did, then you would be my God. And so there's some other action that's going on as well in his anticipation. And there's hearts that are being changed. His heart is being changed.
What are your thoughts about the man that he wrestled? What's up with that?
El Shaddai?
It just says Ish, right?
Yeah. It was a man. Yeah, but what was he? What does he say in a few chapters downstream? Huh? I have seen the face of God. And he implies that when he says that to his brother. Right? It's like, I've seen the face of God. I've seen your face, my brother.
Yeah.
Well, you just did earlier.
Right.
And that interaction changed him to the bone. Yep. Things began to change in his life. The character of this character was a blessing to him because not only was his name changed, his character began to change. It was like becoming born again. All of a sudden, do we become instantly a different person that we're going to be maybe 50 years from now or 25 years from now? No. It's an evolutionary process of God working with us gently, working us. If we're going to be his servant, for us to listen to his voice, or if he's going to be the shepherd, then we're going to be the sheep. If his brother, who is already powerful, that's who he really is, your brother. Be his servant. Be his servant. And that servanthood will do something to your brother.
And I tell you, being a servant is all over Scripture. I mean, it's just all over. I've written a lot about how Satan did not want to be the servant to Adam and Eve. And then Jesus came and was what? The ultimate servant, right? He did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. And, taking that attitude of the servant, when we will humble ourselves, then God can raise us up. But if we're going to raise ourselves up and say, I'm all high and mighty, then God's like, well, there's nowhere left to take you but down, right? And so that's the thing is, if we'll humble ourselves, then God can do the raising up. And I think you're right. I think Jacob was born again, right? That he learned this dramatic lesson, and God went from being the God of my father to being my God. My God.
That's right. We'll see that in more detail later, but that was the turning point. The introduction was the welcoming by those angelic hosts. Welcome. Yeah. We've been here all along waiting for you. Welcome home. Yeah. Welcome home. This is part of your land. This is part of. Well, wait a minute. I don't know. I just left Laban. No, welcome home. and it's that aura that happens, and all of a sudden he gets into this physicality with this whoever this is. And what is it that he is saying to him in his action? And he's what's the struggle? He could have given up, but this is the tenacity that God is looking for. Do not give up. Period.
Mm-hmm.
Contend with your circumstances. Contend with me. I make promises to you. Contend with me. Abraham was God's friend. He says so. God said so. What did he do? He contended with his friend. And God says to him, what can I withhold from Abraham? What can I withhold from him? He's my friend. I must tell him why I'm here. Besides to tell him I came to visit you at the hospital because of your circumcision. Besides that, I have a very important assignment that has to be done. I'm going to bring justice. And so then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Abraham comes jumping in and going, well, what about the number of people? What about, and he starts arguing with God, right? And it's that tenacity that's part of that seed of Abraham that it's inside of Jacob, that he's going to contend. He contended with Laban. He contended all the time, trying to struggle, and he didn't know that God was sharpening his skills in struggle. He didn't realize that we sometimes go, well, God, how come you allowed this to happen? Because it's going to make you better and stronger. That's why. And you're going to end up trusting me more because you would have known, not out of a book, not out of somebody else's testimony. I am growing you up. That's what's going to happen. And that maturation is never a lot of fun. A lot of always, until finally he starts learning that his brother, I'm going to be his servant. He is the firstborn. He is the firstborn, but I will be his servant.
Yeah. Joel is asking, he says, if show people the Masoretic marks above Esau's kiss, looks like a toothy kiss to me. Yeah, we can certainly look at the text there.
Yeah, well, the rabbis had some interesting statements. I will talk to you about it. I don't agree with them, by the way.
I'm finding it pretty hard. I mean, Vayeratz Esav lekato vayechabeku vayipol al svarav vayishakehu vayivku. All right, so this is the word right here that we're looking at, and he kissed him. I don't know.
Well, assuming
I don't see a bite mark. Not in my opinion, but that's I don't know. Sometimes I really like the rabbis, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't know, guys. That seems like a stretch to me.
Well, it was a stretch. You're having two full-grown men, and they're weeping over each other's shoulder.
Yeah, they're not biting each other.
They're not biting each other. They're not biting each other. They're weeping, open mouth, like, oh, my brother, ah. And they're moving. They're grabbing each other. They're struggling with each other. They're holding each other. 20 years have passed. 20 years. And so, but I'm
twins,
seeing,
right? These guys were close. They were close.
Yeah,
they're
did
not
everything.
Just brothers, they're twin brothers. That's the thing,
It's exactly right. So it's this affection that is going on. I don't agree with the rabbis on that at all. I think it was just two human men that had not seen each other, and they had a lot of stuff under a lot of things to think about for 20 years. And what ends up happening, which is interesting, it is Esau who is the generous one.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Jacob, by his namesake, who was scheming, trying to come. He would not let that basic part of his character leave. And God said, I'm going to check that out. I'm going to wrestle with you. And by the end of this event, you will never forget it. Every step that you take for the rest of your life is going to remind you of this event. And everybody, as in Judaism today, when that sinew, is cut out for that leg, they remember this event. There was something very significant about that. When now Israel, who struggles with God and who is his prince, he bears a mark on his life that he'll never forget. And when people ask about that, you must be in pain. Oh, you want to know about that pain? Let me tell you how I got this. That would have been an interesting conversation from his point of view. And when we struggle with God, sometimes we then begin to kind of drag our foot a little bit. Remembering the lesson, that particular lesson that God gave us. And we all have our little owies. We can move up our shirt and say, see this wound here? That came from my brothers. See this over here? No, wait a minute. This one here came from God because I was a pretty heavy-headed guy.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't listen.
So Joel's making the point that 36:12 shows Amalek as Esau's grandson and that they detested each other. Joel, I don't see that, quite frankly. Clearly, Amalek is Esau's grandson. There's no question about that. But whether they detested each other, I think as the family tree grows, then there's going to be this cousin that hates that cousin. I mean, I don't think that is anything new, but I don't think it has anything to do with Esau and the kiss. I think that is rabbis staring at the text too much. It's like, guys, go take a nap. There's nothing there. He didn't bite the guy. All right.
Well,
so I wholeheartely disagree with the rabbis on that one. There was no bite took place. These guys are loving each other. They're happy. They're glad to see one another. There isn't any biting going on.
Well, the position that these rabbis have had about Esau, and I think it boils down to the whole Arab-Israeli issue. There's a subtext underneath all this. And that subtext is Esau was a man of the field. He was not of learning. He falsified his interest in the Torah. He was learning from his father, and then he went out and got these two women that was all the way from way up north and brought him down. He was a fleshly man. He was a man of the culture. There was nothing good about that culture, and that influenced him. He was really an evil guy. So they're attributing all that baggage to this event of two men who haven't seen each other for 20 years, bearing the hatchet of their emotions and all their childishness, and here involving themselves as two grown men that recognize that they're brothers, not only brothers, but twin brothers, and they love each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, as time goes on, their descendants may not like each other. And clearly Amalek was a bad guy. There's no doubt about that. But
no question.
At this stage in the history, I don't see any bad blood between them. And we don't really hear any more of these two guys in particular, except at their dad's funeral. But beyond that, they go their separate ways, and that's that. And then later we find out their descendants are not always nice to each other, and that's a different issue. But we'll get to that. So, okay, let's go to the next chapter. There is more to come. All right, let me get to that next chapter. The Dinah incident.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Now, Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. And when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and violated her. His soul was strongly attracted to Dinah, the daughter of Jacob, and he loved the young woman and spoke kindly to the young woman. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this young woman as a wife." And Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his livestock in the field, so Jacob held his peace until they came. Then Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him. And the sons of Jacob came in from the field when they heard it. And the men were grieved and very angry because he had done a disgraceful thing in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing which ought not to be done. But Hamor spoke with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him as a wife, and make marriages with us. Give your daughters to us, and take our daughters to yourselves. So you shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade it, and acquire possessions for yourselves in it. Then Shechem said to her father and her brothers, let me find favor in your eyes, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Ask me ever so much dowry and gift, and I will give according to what you say to me, but give me the young woman as a wife. But the sons of Jacob answered Shechem and Hamor his father, and spoke deceitfully because he had defiled Dinah their sister. And they said to them, we cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a reproach to us. But on this condition we will consent to you. If you'll become as we are, if every male of you is circumcised, then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to us, and we will dwell with you, and we will become one people. But if you will not heed us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and be gone. And their words pleased Hamor and Shechem, Hamor's son. So the young man did not delay to do the thing, because he delighted in Jacob's daughter. He was more honorable than all the household of his father. And Hamor and Shechem, his son, came to the gate in their city. Let me just mute you there, Bob. And he says, at the gate of their city, and spoke with the men in their city, saying, these men are at peace with us, therefore let them dwell in the land and trade in it, for indeed the land is large enough for them. Let us take their daughters to us as wives, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will the men consent to dwell with us, to be one people. If every male among us is circumcised as they are circumcised, will not their livestock, their property, and every animal of theirs be ours? Only let us consent to them, and they will dwell with us. And all who went out of the gate of his city heeded Hamor and Shechem his son. Every male was circumcised, and all who went out of the gate of his city. Now it came to pass on the third day, when they were in pain, that two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, each took his sword and came boldly upon the city and killed all the males. And they killed Hamor and Shechem his son with the edge of the sword, and took Dinah from Shechem's house and went out. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because their sister had been defiled. They took their sheep, their oxen, their donkeys, that was what was in the city and what was in the field, and all their wealth, all their little ones, and their wives they took captive, and they plundered even all that was in their houses. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have troubled me by making me obnoxious among the inhabitants of the land, among the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And since I am few in number, they will gather themselves together against me and kill me. I shall be destroyed, my whole household and I. But they said, should he treat our sister like a harlot? All right. Boy, those guys, anyway, I mean, I think they were completely wrong to do what they did. I've heard people give sermons like, oh, they did the right thing. I don't know. I just don't see that in the text. Here's what I see. I see a young man that was head over heels for this girl. He did something he shouldn't have done, but I think we need to be very careful, because when we see the word violate, we think of a very violent rape situation. Now, again, let me be clear. He should not have done it, okay? But it sounds a bit like, I don't know, kind of a date rape or something, where, there's kind of a little bit of seduction. There's, the hormones are raging. This isn't just where she's screaming and, he's totally overpowering her and just taking full advantage of her. But, they're doing something they shouldn't do, and one thing leads to another. But this guy is head over heels for her. He loves her. He doesn't hate her. He doesn't just want to use her and dump her, but he loves her, and he's willing to have his foreskin circumcised so that he can have her as his wife. And it says that he was the most honorable in the household. So, again, I think we have some character issues going on here. I think sometimes there's a tendency on our part to say, well, Shechem, he lost out, and we're, go team, Israel, they can do nothing wrong. I don't think that's the case at all. Again, I think we see principles that they're violating, and they should not have done it, and they just cause trouble. So, yeah, that's my perspective. What do you think there, Bob? You're muted.
That's right. I'm muted. Why did they allow her to get off the reservation, as it were, and decide to go tritzing on without someone else into the town of Shechem? What is it? Someone dropped the ball in terms of supervision, and all things being equal, you have to remember what kind of a culture this is. Esau got 2 women from this place. They were Hivites. They were incredibly pagan. Because it's something to be incredibly pagan. Either you're pagan or not pagan. But they were pagan, and they had incredible rights dealing with sexuality. And we're not going to go into the detail of them, but they were not something that you wanted to see happen. But that was their culture. Our kids in churches decide to go, oh, we're just going to go over to this other area and it's going to be okay and whatever. And I know some of these guys from high school and blah, blah, blah. Oh, no. You're not going there. You're not going there because we know better. If anybody knew better, it was Yaakov, right? Now Israel. And somehow or another, it slipped right through his fingers. And he knew what kind of heartache these type of women were to his mom. And she begs her husband, get a wife from my family, from Laban, not from here. Well, what was the deal? It was a horrifying situation. If you read enough about the archaeology of what was going on in the lifestyle with those people, they're a very sexually open society. It was nothing that you want your child to be involved in, male or female. Nonetheless, she ended up in that culture, and these men treated these women like they treated other women in their culture. And here comes this new kid in town, and the next thing you know is that he violates her. I'm sure she was terribly surprised that she didn't want any of this action, but the bottom line is it did happen. And now everybody bears some kind of guilt in this situation. The brothers, they're out for blood. Israel is now, instead of saying, yeah, we're out for blood, he's trying to tone everything down. And he is trying to reason with them. No, we can't have this because you're not like us. We have certain standards. We have certain physicality that involves us with a promise for the land. And on the other side, it's like, what do I get out of this thing? It's gonna be very painful, and I don't want to go through this. But the rest of the village is saying, well, wait a minute. He said that they would become one. So what does that mean? It means all that new sheep, all those donkeys. Did you see all the? You see the camels. These people are wealthy. And they're saying we're going to be just like them. That means we get a piece of whatever they have. So sure, we'll go for that. I'll go for that. Yeah, I'm willing to invest literally in this Brit
or divest.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm putting into the game.
I want to make a point that I really think that they could have come in and they could have become believers in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because remember, Abraham took the people in his camp and what
no doubt.
He circumcised them, right? So the whole idea that, well, they're pagans and they're not godly. Well, everybody was pagan, right? Like everybody's pagan except Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? That's pretty much the case. I mean, you got Melchizedek and look up some of those kind of guys, but this is it. So if you're going to dwell in the land, can you bring people in? Well, I think we see that. We definitely see that people can come in, and taking on circumcision is a way to come in and be part of that. And I think, it's not stated, but I think it's there's an undertone of, hey, this circumcision, maybe he didn't state it, right? But I wonder if it was kind of an undercurrent of, we have this covenant thing, and the circumcision is that covenant. So by being circumcised, you're now becoming part of the covenant that Abraham has with God, right? So,
Israel.
Somebody in the chat was saying, that rape is rape. I totally agree. I'm not excusing this guy. He was wrong to do it. All I'm saying is he liked her. Okay, he wasn't trying to just use her for a quickie and then move on and dump her. That's all I'm trying to say. All right. It was wrong what he did. It was not noble. It happened. Okay. But he's like, okay, I blew it. What can I do to fix it? I really like this girl. I want her as my wife. So this is where I get a little frustrated when I hear people say, not you, of course, but others just like, oh, well, they, those guys had it coming. And I'm like, I don't know. I think that, Jacob and his sons don't fall, apples don't fall far from the tree. This is where they're like, well, this is how our dad operates. He's a conniver. So we're connivers too. They didn't have that born again experience when Jacob was wrestling with the angel, right?
Well, Jacob is now Israel. Right. Remember that. His character is in changing.
Yeah.
And he is laying out, in my opinion, some of that change.
Mm-hmm.
He is saying, you don't understand, we're a covenant people. Okay? And this is what has to happen to be part of our family.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of these people don't belong to our family.
Right.
But they are our family.
Mm-hmm.
All these servants.
Yep.
They're all coming under this covenant with us.
Yeah, that's right. They're all circumcised,
That's right. And so you can't do that. Like, I imagine there was some discussion with the daughter, and she's going, well, I thought he was really nice and all that, and now all of a sudden and then it got too far, and then I said no, and he said, but why? This is part of what we do. This is our call. I mean, it's understanding what cultural context that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And they did nothing wrong in their eyes that they had in their lifestyle.
Mm.
And so what happens, what they're thinking is just another event for them.
It's like the world today.
Just like that. Exactly. It's just like
you meet someone at the bar. Hey, you want to go sleep together? Sure, why not? I mean,
exactly that.
I got nothing else going on tonight.
Well, where's the mother, or where is the other? Where's your brother walking down into Shechem?
Mm.
What's going on here? There's other events that are everybody's dropping the ball somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Well, honey, I'm going to go out. I'll go over there. Okay. Well, over there is what?
Mm-hmm.
No one asked the question. I mean, it's implied that somebody is doing something. Somebody went out of town to go do something, going from the camp
mm-hmm.
over to the village. They went to the village, and there's this wonderful looking guy. His name is Shechem. Hey, it means he's a big, broad-shouldered guy. That's what it basically means. And he's royalty. He's the chieftain's son. He's a prince. Wow. And everybody kind of like, okay, hi, and they all know that he's in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's mesmerized by that, and all of a sudden it's like the end of the world, and I can appreciate that. What's interesting is the reaction that Israel has when he addresses this issue. He turns around and he says, I'm not in disagreement with her marrying this guy, but you have to understand who we are. We're people of a covenant. And if you want to be part of us, we have to be all one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we have to be on the same page. That means we're not going to go anywhere. We're going to be with you, and you're to settle around you. And then we're going to have to tell you what that covenant is all about to
Mm-hmm.
all your people.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to be a one, is this where some of the new sand from the beaches? I don't know. This is something that I remember. Is this another way of that happening? I don't know. But I know that my grandfather brought in a lot of people. I know that my dad brought in a lot of people, and they become part of that covenant.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is the whole situation. At any rate, he wanted peace. It says he wanted peace, but the two brothers decided no.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting about Shimon and Levi.
Mm-hmm.
In the future, they're going to be very violent men as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about their character and their DNA, as it were. If we see 430 years downstream, we're going to see some great violence coming out of them. So there's something happening in their own situation. They concoct an idea of how they're going to take the entire village or the city. They're going to have booty. Did they take all their brothers with them? No. They went out there and they went through the process. They kind of sat around and watched everything happen, waited for 3 days when everybody is still in a great deal of pain. And like lightning, they hit everybody and killed everybody, all the men. Then they take all the children, the women, the animals, and all the booty, and they move them all out of town. I mean, this is unbelievable. The rest of the brothers then participated in getting the booty and making sure that they had everything controlled, and they absorbed them into their camp. And I mean, it's really mind-boggling, but how all these events happen. What effect did it have on this new prince that walks with God or content with God? He says, "Oh my God, oh what you have done! We didn't come here all this distance. I mean, here he is, a 60-year-old man, hoping to find a place for his family." And you go in there, and the first thing you do is start a war.
He just got done with my brother. He didn't.
My brother, and I thought it was going to be the end of the planet, and here we are starting a war. We're going to have to get out of there. That set up a whole different expectation of who they were, because as we read through the text, back to what the text says, everybody left them alone. They said, "We think as the Hittites, we're bad. No, these guys are worse. Leave them alone."
Yeah, there's a comment here in Obey says Jacob was to return to Canaan. He was not to pitch his tent in Shechem. Here in Obey, he is in Canaan. All right, so Shechem is in Canaan.
Yeah, that's where Shechem is.
The big country area. Okay. And Shechem is a city in that. All right. So he was already there. That's why the angels met him at the beginning of 30.
That's right. Welcome home.
Yeah. Let's go back there really quick. We didn't actually read that because it's not technically part of the parasha, but we should have. Okay. So Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him.
Right.
When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp," and he called the name of the place Mahanaim. All right. So that's what we're talking about. When he came back, came out of Padan Aram, he crosses whatever border there is, okay, and boom, he's in Canaan. And So there you go. So anywhere he put his foot was his territory. So Shechem is still part of that area. It's currently in some of the, it's in Samaria, a little bit of disputed territory and all that stuff, but that's a different discussion altogether. It ultimately is Israel's. Okay. And so he could have stayed there, and what's so amazing about the Bible is the story didn't have to turn out the way it did.
Right.
But this is how it turned out, right? It could have had a different ending, but these are the choices that people made, and God's like, okay, I'll work with that, and I'll still accomplish what I said I was going to do. There's the hard way and there's the easy way, and this is definitely a harder way to go. It's not respectable. It's not integrity. There's no integrity in this. So I think sometimes we fall into the trap of, well, it happened in the Bible, therefore God condoned it. No.
It's the good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah. The Bible has got all the dirty laundry in it. And just because we're reading about the dirty laundry does not mean that God wanted it to happen that way. God's principles do not change. And that's what's so important. That is why I like to talk about God's principles, his characters, his values. When we talk about Torah, we're talking about his values. And his values do not change. Can you imagine Jesus saying, yeah, just go in there and kill everybody? Jesus wouldn't do that, right? If we have the "What would Jesus do" bracelet, he wouldn't do that, right? Because he doesn't come to destroy men's lives. He comes to save them. So that the values and character of Jesus is the same value and characters that the Father has. We got to make that really clear. So he's working with Jacob. Yes, he wrestles with Jacob. Jacob is going through a heart transplant, if you will. Not quite there. His family is slow to get the memo. But, God's values don't change. And so that really, I think, is the bottom line. So when you read these stories, keep God's values in mind. That's why we study the law, so that we know what those values are. And then we apply those principles to these stories. We can say, well, okay, he didn't do so well there, but I see God's grace, because, he did not do what God wanted him to do, but there was still grace that was going on. Yeah. Well, we're out of time. Again, thank you for an excellent show. I want to thank everybody out there for joining us. This was always good. So we'll be back next week with more of the Torah portion. So make sure you get the Way Congregation app. It has a audio Bible that will read the Torah portion to you. It's seriously cool, right? It has all kinds of stuff, free downloads, lots of tools that are going to help you just grow in your walk with the Lord. So God bless you, and we will see you